The emergency signal came through the Galactic Communication Network at 0347 hours, Standard Time. It was weak, broken, and filled with static. "Doing this is Viridian Prime calling all Council members," the voice said through the crackling transmission. "We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. The Crimson Horde has entered our system. They have already destroyed 2 of our worlds. Please, we need help. We are dying." The transmission cut to static. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, on the neutral world of Nexus Station, representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence. The Viridians were peaceful farmers. They grew food for half the galaxy. They had no military, no weapons, no way to fight back against anyone. "How many ships does the Horde have?" asked Ambassador Vex of the Altarian Empire. His blue skin looked pale under the chamber lights. "Our scouts report at least 200 vessels," came another broken transmission from Viridian space. "They strip everything. They take all resources. They leave nothing behind. Please, someone help us." The silence in the chamber grew heavier. Admiral Voss of the Cetacean Federation spoke first. 200 ships. That's 3 times larger than our biggest fleet. We cannot fight those numbers. The distance is too great, added General Zim from the Silicon Collective. His metal body clicked as he moved. "By the time we get there, it will be too late. The Viridians feed billions of people across the galaxy. Send food aid afterward." "Admiral," Voss replied coldly, "we cannot risk our fleets for a lost cause." The debate went on for hours. The powerful species of the galaxy made excuse after excuse. Too far, too dangerous, too expensive. Not their problem. Meanwhile, in a small section of the station, the human delegation watched the debate in growing anger. Admiral Li Dongmin sat with his hands folded. He was 52 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He commanded the 7th Expeditionary Fleet of the Earth Defense Force. It was not a famous command. The 7th Fleet was where Earth sent its old ships and problem officers. "Sir," said Captain Park Ji-woo, sitting beside him, "we should say something." Li shook his head. "Let them finish talking first." Captain Park was younger, only 35, with the kind of energy that made older officers nervous. He had been transferred to the 7th Fleet after questioning orders. "One too many times, people are dying while they argue about politics." "I know," Li said quietly. Dr. Kim Hai-jin leaned forward from her seat. She was the fleet's chief medical officer and alien expert. "The Crimson Horde doesn't just kill people," she said. "They consume everything. They strip planets down to the core." He was the fleet's tactical officer, a serious man who studied every battle in galactic history. 15 billion dead. "And these idiots are going to let it happen again," muttered Sergeant Major Yoon Sora. She commanded the 7th Fleet's Marine units. She was small but tough, with scars on her hands from years of combat training. The debate in the main chamber continued. Hours passed. The Viridian transmissions became more desperate. "The Horde fleet is moving toward our capital system. Estimated time of arrival, 6 days. Please, anyone who can hear this, help us." Finally, Admiral Li stood up. "What are you doing?" Captain Park whispered. "What we came here to do," Li replied. He walked to the human delegation's speaking platform. Humans were still considered a junior species, so their platform was smaller and positioned near the back. Li pressed the communication button. "The Earth Defense Force volunteers for this mission." The entire chamber fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned to look at the small human delegation. Ambassador Vex was the first to speak. "Admiral Li, with respect, your species has only been part of this council for 20 years. You do not understand the scope of this threat." "I understand that people are dying," Li replied. General Zim's metal voice echoed through the chamber. "Admiral, the Crimson Horde has 200 warships." The chamber erupted in noise. Aliens clicked, buzzed, and whistled in their various languages. Most of it was laughter. 12 ships, Admiral Voss said when the noise died down. "Admiral Li, that is not a rescue mission. That is suicide. Your crews are ... How do humans say it? Misfits." Li felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "Our ships work. Our crews know their jobs." "But Admiral," Ambassador Dex said almost kindly, the 7th Fleet has never won a major engagement. Even your own people call it the failure fleet. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Captain Park started to stand up, anger flashing in his eyes, but Lee held up a hand to stop him. "You're right," Lee said. "We're not the best fleet humanity has. We have the oldest ships. We have officers that other fleets didn't want. We don't win in the computer simulations." The laughter grew louder. Lee waited for it to die down. Then he continued, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "But we're the fleet that's here. We're the fleet that's ready to go. And when people are dying, you don't send your best ships. You send the ships you have." The laughter stopped. The Viridians asked for help. Lee continued. Not from the best fleet, not from the strongest ships. They asked for help from anyone who would come. That's us. Ambassador Vex shook his head. "Admiral, this is admirable, but foolish. 12 ships cannot stop 200. Maybe not," Lee said, "but 12 ships can try. 12 ships can buy time. 12 ships can evacuate civilians. 12 ships can make the Horde work for their victory. You will all die," General Zim stated flatly. Lee looked around the chamber at all the powerful species who had spent hours finding reasons not to help. "Maybe," he said, "but we'll die trying to save people." "What will you die doing?" The chamber fell silent again. Dr. Kim stood up at her station. The 7th Fleet Medical Corps volunteers. Captain Park stood next. The 7th Fleet Navy volunteers. Sergeant Major Yoon was next. The 7th Fleet Marines volunteer. One by one, every human in the delegation stood. Admiral Lee looked back at Ambassador Vex. "When do we leave?" "Admiral, the Council cannot officially support this mission. Do you understand that?" "I understand that perfectly. If you fail, Earth will lose its only fleet in that sector. Please, this is Viridian Prime. 4 more worlds have gone silent. The Horde is 6 days away from our capital. 800 million people live here. Please, someone help us." Lee turned to his delegation. "Signal the fleet. We leave in 2 hours." As the humans filed out of the chamber, alien voices rose behind them. "They're going to die for nothing," Admiral Voss declared. Ambassador Vex watched the humans leave. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "but they're going to die trying." Nexus Station. 12 ships against 200. The Soul's Pride was 43 years old. Her hull showed every year of service. Dents from asteroid impacts, burn marks from weapon fire, patches welded over holes that should have been properly repaired. She was the flagship of the 7th Fleet, and she looked like it had seen better days. Captain Park Ji-woo walked through the ship's corridors, checking on his crew. The walls hummed with the sound of old engines working harder than they should. The lights flickered sometimes. The air recycling system made strange noises. "Status report," Park said as he entered the bridge. "We're holding together, sir," replied Lieutenant Commander Choi Minho from the tactical station. "The jump drive is running at 90% efficiency. That's good for a ship this old." "What about weapons?" "Our main guns are 20 years behind current models. Our missile systems are older than that, but they work." Park nodded. It was the story of the entire 7th Fleet. Everything worked, but nothing was new. The fleet had left Nexus Station 12 hours ago. They had 3 weeks to reach Viridian space, 3 weeks to figure out how 12 old ships could face 200 enemy vessels. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Nam Tae-hoon was working on problems that newer ships didn't have. He was a thin man with quick hands and creative solutions. He had been court-martialed 5 years ago for excessive creativity. "In repairs, sir," said his assistant, Technician Ko Min-soo, "the power coupling in Section 7 is acting up again." "Define acting up," Nam said, not looking up from his work. "It's making a sound like a dying animal." Nam smiled. "That's normal. It's been making that sound for 2 years. When it stops making that sound, then we worry." Ko looked confused. "Is that safe?" "Probably not, but it works." Nam finally looked up. "Kid, you're new to the 7th Fleet, aren't you?" "Yes, sir. Transferred here last month. Let me teach you something. In newer fleets, everything works perfectly until it breaks completely. In the 7th Fleet, everything is broken but still works. It's a different way of thinking." Ko frowned. "How do you tell the difference between broken but working and broken. Experience, Nam said. And luck. In the medical bay, Dr. Kim Hae-jin was studying everything the fleet knew about the Crimson Horde. It wasn't much. The Horde was nomadic. They traveled in large fleets, stripping resources from planets and moving on. They were strong, aggressive, and had never been successfully negotiated with, Doctor said, her assistant nurse, Ju Yoon-young. The psychological profiles don't make sense. How so? The Horde attacks seem random, but they're not. They always target agricultural worlds first, then industrial planets, then move on. It's like they're following a pattern. Dr. Kim looked up from her files. What kind of pattern? Like they're shopping for groceries, Nurse Ju said. Food first, then materials, then they leave. Interesting observation. The Busan Hope, the fleet's second largest ship, pilot Han Yun-soo, was training with the other fighter pilots. She was 28 years old and had been transferred to the 7th Fleet for insubordination. Her crime had been refusing to abandon wounded Marines during a rescue mission. Listen up, she said to the squadron of 12 pilots. We have 20 fighters total. The enemy probably has over 500. Those are terrible odds, said pilot Lee Sang-woo. Yes, they are, Han agreed. So we're not going to fight fair. What do you mean? New fleets fight by the book. They follow regulations. They do everything properly. Han smiled. We're the 7th Fleet. We don't have a book. We make it up as we go. In Admiral Lee's ready room, the senior officers gathered for their daily planning meeting. The room was small and cramped. The table was scratched and worn, but it was where they would plan their impossible mission. Intelligence update, Lee said. Looking at Communications Officer Lim Jun-SIK.Lim was a quiet man who had been demoted. From his previous position for questioning orders that would have caused civilian casualties, Sir, we're intercepting more Viridian transmissions. The situation is getting worse. How much worse? 5 more worlds have gone silent. The Horde is moving faster than expected. They'll reach Viridian Prime in 4 days, not 6. The room fell silent. That cuts our travel time short, Captain Park said. We'll have to push the engines harder. The engines will hold, Engineer Nam said confidently. Probably. What about our battle plan? Asked Sergeant Major Yoon. So Admiral Lee stood and activated the holographic display. It showed the Viridian system with known Horde positions. The enemy fleet was massive. Red dots covered half the display. Traditional fleet tactics won't work, Lee said. We can't fight them ship to ship. We can't match their firepower. So what do? Captain Park asked. We don't fight like a fleet, Lee replied. We fight like humans, sir. Commander Choi looked confused. Lee walked around the table. What do other species say about humans? We're emotional. We're unpredictable. We don't follow proper military doctrine. We make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. They say we're weird, added Sergeant Major Yoon. Exactly. They think those are weaknesses. What if they're wrong? Dr. Kim leaned forward. You want to use our weaknesses as weapons. Think about it, Lee said. Every other species fights the same way. They follow patterns. They use standard tactics. They're predictable. The Horde knows how to fight them. But they don't know how to fight us, Captain Park said, understanding. Right? We're the new species. We've only been in space for 50 years. We don't have centuries of military tradition telling us the right way to fight, Engineer Nam grinned. So we make up our own way. But Admiral Commander Choi said, we still only have 12 ships. 12 ships that will do things the enemy doesn't expect, Pilot Han said. She had been listening from the doorway. 12 ships that will break every rule in the book. What about our crew, Sergeant Major? Yoon asked. You said we're misfits. How is that an advantage? Admiral Lee smiled. Because misfits think differently. The officer who questions orders might see a solution that others miss. The engineer who breaks regulations might fix something that should be impossible. The pilot who doesn't follow standard procedures might survive when others don't. You're talking about turning our problems into weapons, Dr. Kim said. Our problems are just different ways of thinking, Lee replied. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that different isn't always worse. The meeting continued for 2 hours. They planned unconventional tactics. They discussed using their ship's low sensor signatures as an advantage. They talked about psychological warfare and unpredictable movements. But mostly they planned to survive long enough to help people. Later that night, Captain Park walked through the ship again. The corridors were quieter now, but the work never stopped. Crew members were everywhere, preparing for battle. In the engineering section, teams were modifying weapons in ways that weren't in any manual. In the fighter bay, pilots were practicing maneuvers that would make flight instructors faint. In the medical bay, doctors were preparing for casualties they hoped they wouldn't have. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kang Soo-jin, the night watch officer, "the crew is asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "They want to know if we really think we can win." Park looked out a viewport at the stars streaming past. Somewhere ahead of them, people were dying while they waited for help that might never come. "Tell them we're not going there to win," Park said. "We're going there to try. Sometimes that's all you can do." And if trying isn't enough, Park thought about the desperate voices they had heard on the Viridian transmissions. Mothers calling for their children, fathers begging for someone to save their families, 800 million people waiting for help, 12 old ships, with misfit crews heading toward an enemy they couldn't defeat in a fair fight. But they weren't planning to fight fair. They were planning to fight like humans, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The 7th Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Viridian territory. What they saw made everyone go silent. Where there should have been green living worlds, there were only gray rocks floating in space. 3 entire planets had been stripped, bare. The Crimson Horde had taken everything: soil, water, plants, animals, even the atmosphere. Nothing remained but dead stone. "My God," whispered Dr. Kim from the medical bay as she watched the sensor readings. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, staring at the destruction. "How long did this take them?" "According to the timeline," said Commander Choi, "about 2 days per planet." Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life. "Unknown Fleet, this is Refugee Convoy, Delta 7. Yourselves. This is Admiral Lee of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to help." A long pause, then, "Earth Defense Force. You're the help the Council sent." "We're the help that came," Lee replied. The refugee convoy consisted of 30 ships of all sizes, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even small personal craft. "Admiral," the convoy leader said, "we have over 50,000 people here. Our ships are breaking down. We need food, water, medical supplies." "We'll help," Lee said immediately. "Captain Kong, bring the Incheon Mercy alongside. Begin emergency aid." Captain Kong Soo-ben commanded the fleet's medical ship. She was a small woman with steady hands and a warm voice. "This is Viridian Command," a tired voice said. "The Horde, main fleet, is 12 hours from our capital system." Dr. Jang Hyurim, the fleet's alien psychology expert, listened to the transmissions with growing concern. "Admiral, the way they describe the Horde attacks, it's not like normal warfare." "What do you mean?" "Normal conquerors want to control territory. They want to rule. 3 massive vessels, each one twice the size of the Soul's Pride. They looked more like floating factories than warships. Huge metal mouths at the front, processing equipment in the middle, storage tanks at the back. "Battle stations," Admiral Lee ordered. The human fleet moved to intercept 12 small ships against 3 giants. Admiral Commander Choi said, "Their ships are heavily armored. Our weapons might not penetrate then." "We don't try to penetrate," Lee replied. "Captain Park, begin evasive maneuvers. Make us hard to hit." The Horde ships fired massive energy beams that could destroy a ship in one hit. But they were slow to turn and track targets. The human ships darted around like insects, firing at weak points, using asteroids for cover. Pilot Han led her fighters in hit-and-run attacks, striking and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "They're not used to fast targets," Han reported over the radio. "These ships are built to fight other big ships, not fighters." Engineer Nam had an idea. "Captain, what if we use their size against them? How their weapons are designed for long-range battles. If we get close enough, they can't hit us." It was a crazy plan. The human ships flew directly at the enemy vessels, passing through their weapon fire. What they found inside was horrifying. The ship was part factory, part slaughterhouse. Machines processed organic matter into food paste. Other machines melted down metal and stone. "These aren't warships," Yoon reported. "They're mobile processing plants. They turn planets into resources." The humans managed to damage to Horde scouts and drive off the third. The main fleet was still coming. As they rescued more refugees, the 7th Fleet learned the true scope of the disaster. Viridian Prime held 800 million people. "We have to buy them time," Admiral Lee said during an emergency meeting. "Time for what?" Captain Park asked. The council made it clear, no one else is coming. Time to evacuate. Time to save who we can. Communications Officer Lim had been monitoring all frequencies. "Admiral, I'm picking up Horde communications. They're not encrypted." "What are they saying?" "It's strange, sir. They're talking about quotas, food quotas, metal quotas, population quotas." "I've been analyzing tissue samples from the Horde ships. These beings, they're not evil. They're starving. Starving, their metabolism requires enormous amounts of resources. They consume constantly, or they die. They attack other worlds because they have to, not because they want to." "No," Dr. Kim agreed. "But it might make them predictable." The 7th Fleet spent the next few hours preparing for the impossible. They couldn't defeat 200 ships, but maybe they could confuse them. Maybe they could delay them. Maybe they could save some lives. "Admiral," came a transmission from Viridian Prime. "What purpose?" "So you have time to run." The Horde main fleet appeared on sensors 8 hours later. The display screen filled with red dots, ships of every size, from small scouts to massive factory vessels bigger than space stations. "My God," someone whispered on the bridge, but Admiral Lee smiled grimly. "Look at that formation. They're not expecting a fight. They're expecting a harvest." "How do you know?" "Because they're flying in resource-gathering formation, not battle formation. They think this will be easy." Captain Park activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is your captain. We're about to do something that's probably impossible. We're going to make 200 enemy ships very, very angry at 12 human ships." "Why would we want to do that?" someone asked. "Because angry enemies make mistakes. And when they're chasing us, they're not killing civilians." The 7th Fleet moved toward the edge of the Viridian system. Behind them, 800 million people waited for death or salvation. Ahead of them, the largest enemy fleet in galactic history moved forward like a metal storm. But the humans weren't running away. They were running toward the fight. The 7th Fleet hit the Horde formation like a stone thrown into a beehive. Admiral Lee had spread his 12 ships across 100,000 kilometers. When the Horde fleet entered the system in their neat resource-gathering formation, the humans struck from 6 different directions at once. Remember, Lee broadcast to all ships, "We're not trying to win. We're trying to be annoying." And annoying they were. The Soul's Pride darted between 2 massive Horde factory ships, firing at their communication arrays. The Busan Hope launched all its fighters in a swarm attack that confused enemy sensors. The medical ship Incheon Mercy used its powerful engines to ram a Horde scout, then jumped away before the explosion reached it. "This is madness," Commander Choi said as explosions bloomed around them. "No," Captain Park replied, throwing the ship into a wild spin to avoid enemy fire. "This is pest control. We're the pests." The Horde fleet tried to respond with overwhelming force, but their ships were designed for methodical planet stripping, not fast-moving combat. Their massive weapons couldn't track the darting human vessels. Engineer Nam had been busy during the approach. "Captain, I've modified our torpedo warheads." "Modified? How?" "Instead of explosive tips, I've loaded them with industrial waste from our recycling systems. Garbage, basically." "Why?" "Watch." Nam fired a spread of modified torpedoes at a Horde factory ship. When they hit, they didn't explode. Instead, they dumped tons of random junk into the ship's processing systems. The factory ship ground to a halt as its automated systems tried to process human garbage. Warning lights flashed across its hull. "Brilliant," Dr. Zhang said from her station. "You gave their digestive system indigestion." Pilot Han led her fighters on increasingly daring raids. Instead of attacking weapons or engines, they targeted the strange organic components that seemed to be part of every Horde ship. "It's like they're partially alive," she reported. "When we damage the organic parts, the whole ship gets sluggish." "Keep hitting those targets," Admiral Lee ordered. The running battle continued for 6 hours. The humans couldn't destroy the enemy ships, but they could damage them, confuse them, and most importantly, delay them. But the cost was high. The Daegu-dan took a direct hit and lost half its weapon systems. The Gwangju Guardian had to make an emergency jump when its shields failed. Several fighters were destroyed. "Admiral," Communications Officer Lim reported, "I'm intercepting interesting Horde communications." "What kind of interesting?" "They're arguing. The ship commanders are blaming each other for not catching us. Some want to split up to hunt us down. Others want to ignore us and continue to the planet. Division in the enemy ranks." Admiral Lee smiled. "Keep monitoring." Dr. Kim had been studying the battle data. "Admiral, I think I understand what they are. Explain they're not just warriors or pirates. They're refugees. Hungry refugees who consume planets because they have no choice." "How do you know?" "Their ship designs. Everything is about efficiency and survival. They take only what they need and move on quickly. They're running from something." Intelligence Officer Baek Du-hyen looked up from his analysis station. "Running from what? Themselves? Probably. Or the consequences of what they've become." The battle took an unexpected turn when Major Song Dejin led a boarding party onto a damaged Horde vessel. Instead of fighting to the death, the Horde crew surrendered immediately. "They're not soldiers," Song reported. "They're workers. Scared. Workers who just want to survive." The captured Horde beings looked like large insects with extra arms for handling tools. They communicated through chemical signals and seemed terrified of the humans. Through translation devices, the humans learned the truth. The Horde had consumed their own homeworld centuries ago. Now they traveled the galaxy, taking what they needed to feed their population. They attacked agricultural worlds first because they needed food most desperately. "They're not evil," Dr. Kim said after examining the prisoners. "They're desperate. Desperate beings can be just as dangerous as evil ones," Sergeant Major Yu pointed out, "but they can also be reasoned with," Admiral Lee said thoughtfully. The 7th Fleet continued their harassment campaign. They hit supply lines, damaged processing equipment, and generally made the Horde fleet's life miserable. The enemy formation, once neat and organized, became scattered and confused. Admiral Technical Specialist Shin Hana reported from the engineering deck, "I've been analyzing their biotechnology. I think I can turn some of it against them. How their ships use organic computers for coordination. If I can introduce a virus into their system, do it." Shin's computer virus spread through the Horde fleet like a plague. Ships that had been working together suddenly couldn't coordinate. Factory vessels began processing the wrong materials. Scout ships got lost. But the victory was temporary. The Horde adapted quickly, isolating infected systems and developing countermeasures. "They learned fast," Shin reported. "Then we'll have to learn faster," Admiral Lee replied. The human fleet had been fighting for 12 hours when the impossible happened. Long-range sensors detected ships approaching the system. Lots of ships. Admiral Commander Choi said with disbelief, "I'm reading Galactic Council fleet signatures." "Which fleets?" "All of them, sir. Altarian, Cetacean, Silicon Collective." "Everyone, how many ships?" "Over 300, sir." Admiral Lee stared at the display. "Why are they here?" The answer came through a transmission from Ambassador Thex of the Altarian Empire. "Admiral Lee, this is Ambassador Thex. We've been monitoring your battle. Monitoring the entire galaxy has been watching. What you've done here, 12 ships, holding off 200, it's changed everything. I don't understand. Admiral, you've shown us something we thought was impossible. You've shown us that the Horde can be fought, that they can be confused, delayed, and defeated." Captain Park looked at Admiral Lee with amazement. "Sir, I think we just became the most famous fleet in the galaxy." "We're not done yet," Lee replied. "The Horde is still here. Viridian Prime is still in danger." But as the Council fleets took position around the system, something unexpected happened. The Horde fleet stopped advancing. "They're not running," Commander Choi observed, "but they're not attacking either. They're thinking," Dr. Kim said. "For the first time in centuries, they're facing an enemy that fought back successfully. They don't know what to do." Admiral Lee made a decision that would change galactic history. "Open a channel to the Horde fleet," he ordered. "Sir," Communications Officer Lim looked confused. "It's time to talk." The communication channel opened with static and strange clicking sounds. Then a translator began converting the Horde language into something humans could understand. "Why do you resist?" the voice asked. It sounded tired, not angry. "We take only what we need, you delay the inevitable. Admiral Lee sat in his command chair, choosing his words carefully, because people asked for help. That's what we do, help. The concept seemed to confuse the Horde speaker. We do not understand this word in combat context. We help because others need help. It's not complicated. A long pause. Then, you are the small ships that bite you fight strangely. Why do you not die properly? Captain Park almost smiled. Did they just call us mosquitoes? I think it was meant as a compliment, Dr. Kim said. Admiral Lee continued the conversation. We don't die properly because we're stubborn. We don't like seeing people hurt. People hurt is natural. Strong consume weak. This is the way, not our way. Another pause. The Horde fleet hung motionless in space, 300 massive ships. Waiting for orders from their leaders, Dr. Kim moved to Admiral Lee's side. Sir, may I try something? Lee nodded. Dr. Kim activated her communicator. Horde fleet, this is Dr. Kim, I'm a healer. I want to understand why you consume worlds. Consume worlds is survival. We hunger always. If we do not consume, we die. What if there was another way? Other way does not exist. We have searched 4,000 cycles. What if you're wrong? The channel went silent for several minutes. When the Horde speaker returned, his voice sounded different. Less mechanical, more curious. Healer Kim, explain other way. Dr. Kim looked at Admiral Lee, who nodded encouragement. Your people are starving, she said. But there are empty systems in the galaxy. Worlds with no life, but rich in minerals. Asteroids full of metals, gas giants with chemicals you need. Why attack living worlds when dead ones could feed you? Dead worlds do not have organics. We need life stuff for food. What if we could grow life stuff for you? What if we could farm food instead of stealing it? The silence stretched longer this time. When the Horde speaker returned, other voices could be heard in the background. They were arguing. Some say Healer Kim speaks wisdom. Others say Healer Kim speaks deception. We are ... divided. Commander Unsungwoo had been monitoring Horde fleet movements. Admiral, their formation is changing. Some ships are pulling back, others are moving forward. They're splitting up, Admiral Lee realized. Some want to fight, others want to talk. The situation became more complex as more council fleets arrived. Ambassador Thex's voice came through the communication system. Admiral Lee, we have sufficient force to destroy the Horde fleet. Should we attack? Negative, Lee replied immediately. We're trying to negotiate. Negotiate, Admiral. These beings have destroyed dozens of worlds because they were starving. If we can solve that problem, we might not need to fight. Technical specialist Shin Hana had been working frantically at her station. Admiral, I've been analyzing Horde biotechnology. Dr. Kim is right. We could adapt our agricultural techniques to grow the organic compounds they need. How long would it take? With their biotech and our farming knowledge, maybe 6 months. To set up the first test facility, the Horde channel crackled back to life. Healer Kim, if your words are truth, what do you require? Dr. Kim looked around the bridge. Every human officer was watching her. The fate of 2 civilizations might depend on her next words. Trust, she said simply. We need you to trust us enough to try. Trust is dangerous. Trust leads to betrayal. Sometimes, Dr. Kim agreed, but it also leads to friendship. Another long pause. Then, we do not understand friendship. Would you like to learn? The Horde fleet began moving. For a moment, everyone thought they were preparing to attack. But instead, about 50 ships separated from the main group and moved toward the human fleet. Small ships that bite. These vessels contain our ... wise ones, leaders who think much. They wish to see your friendship concept. Admiral Lee felt his heart racing. All ships, stand down weapons. Prepare to receive visitors. Admiral Sergeant, Major Yoon said quietly. Are you sure about this? No, Lee admitted, but it's better than the alternative. The first Horde ship to dock with the Soul's Pride was smaller than the others. Clearly designed for leadership rather than processing, the beings who came aboard were different from the workers they had captured earlier. These were larger, with more complex markings on their shell-like skin. The leader introduced himself through the translator as Deep Thinker. He looked around the human ship with obvious curiosity. Your vessel is small but complex, he observed. built for many purposes, not just consumption. We build ships to explore and help, Captain Park explained. Not just to survive, help again. This concept interests us greatly. Dr. Kim led the Horde delegation through the ship. They were especially fascinated by the medical bay and the recreational areas. You heal those who cannot work, Deep Thinker asked. We heal everyone, Dr. Kim replied. Useful or not. Why? Because they're people. People have value beyond their usefulness. Deep Thinker stopped walking. This is difficult to understand. In our society, non-productive beings are recycled for nutrients. In our society, Dr. Kim said gently, non-productive beings are taken care of by others. The negotiations continued for hours. Slowly, a plan emerged. The Council would provide the Horde with uninhabited systems rich in minerals. Human agricultural specialists would work with Horde biotechnicians to develop sustainable food production. In exchange, the Horde would stop attacking inhabited worlds. But not all of the Horde fleet agreed. Half of our ships accept this plan, Deep Thinker reported. Half say it is weakness. They prepare to attack your Council fleets. Admiral Lee looked at the tactical display. Over 100 Horde ships were moving into attack formation, while the others held position. Civil war, he said quietly. We have tried to prevent this division for many cycles, Deep Thinker said sadly. Some of our people believe only in the old ways. Then we'll have to convince them, Admiral Lee said. The Battle of Viridian Prime began an hour later, but it wasn't the battle anyone expected. Council fleets engaged the aggressive Horde ships, while the 7th Fleet and the peaceful Horde vessels worked together to protect civilian evacuees. Squadron in the defense of a refugee convoy, Pilot Han flew alongside Horde fighters. They're completely different technologies, somehow working in harmony. This is weird, Han reported, but it's working. The aggressive Horde ships fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered and isolated from their support vessels. Many surrendered when they realized their cause was hopeless. The battle ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The peaceful faction of the Horde was granted territory in the Outer Rim. Human agricultural ships began the journey to help establish sustainable food production. The aggressive faction was given a choice: join the peace process or be relocated to uninhabited systems where they could continue their old ways without harming others. Most chose peace. Deep Thinker, who questioned, stood on the Bridge of the Souls. Pride, as the fleets prepared to separate. Your friendship concept, he said to Admiral Lee, it is more powerful than we understood. How so? It changes everything. It makes the impossible become possible. Admiral Lee smiled. That's what friends do for each other. 6 months later, Admiral Lee stood in the same chamber of the Galactic Council where this had all begun. But everything was different now. The 7th Fleet was no longer called the Failure Fleet. Ships and officers from across the galaxy requested transfers to serve under Lee's command. The fleet had grown from 12 vessels to over 60, with crews from a dozen different species. Admiral Lee, Ambassador Thex, said from his platform. The Council recognizes the extraordinary success of the Viridian operation. The chamber was packed. Representatives from every member species had come to hear the report. Even the Horde sent delegates. Deep Thinker, whose questions sat in a specially constructed platform designed for his species. The operation succeeded beyond all expectations. Dex continued. Not only were the Viridian worlds saved, but a new form of galactic diplomacy was born. Admiral Lee stepped to the human platform. He looked older now, with new gray in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. But he also looked satisfied. 6 months ago, he began, this council decided that the Viridian crisis was impossible to solve, too dangerous, too expensive, too difficult. You proved us wrong, admitted General Zim of the Silicon Collective. Your methods were unconventional. Our methods were human, Lee replied. We refused to accept that people had to die just because saving them was difficult. Captain Park sat in the delegation, wearing the new insignia of Admiral Park. He had been promoted to command the 7th Fleet's 2nd Division. Dr. Kim wore the rank of Fleet Medical Director. Engineer Nam had been given a new title, Chief Innovation Officer. The agricultural projects are exceeding expectations, Dr. Kim reported when called to speak. Horde biotechnology, combined with human farming techniques, has created the most efficient food production systems in galactic history. The former Horde factory ships have been converted to mobile farms. Engineer Nam added, they're producing enough food to feed their entire population, plus surplus for trade. Who questions rose to address the chamber. The humans taught us that survival and consumption are not the same thing. Survival can be achieved through cooperation. This is a new concept for our people. How many of your people have joined the peace process? Ambassador Thex asked. 87% of our fleet. The remaining 13% have been relocated to unpopulated systems where they continue traditional ways without harming others. Admiral Voss of the Cetacean Federation had been notably quiet during the proceedings. Finally, he spoke. Admiral Lee, I owe you an apology. We called your fleet weak. We said your ships were too old, your crews too problematic. You weren't wrong, Lee replied. Our ships were old. Our crews were misfits. We didn't fit the standard military model. But that's exactly why you succeeded where we would have failed. Fleet Admiral Hong Jae-sung, commander of humanity's First Fleet, stood to address the chamber. The success of the Seventh Fleet has changed how we think about military service. We're no longer trying to make every fleet the same. We're encouraging diversity of thought and approach. What does this mean practically? Asked Captain Ricks of the trade union. It means the galaxy now has multiple response options, Admiral Lee explained. Traditional fleets for conventional threats, specialized fleets for unique challenges, and mixed species fleets for diplomatic missions. The Seventh Fleet model is being adopted by other species, Admiral Han continued. The Altarians are forming their own misfit fleet. The Cetaceans are experimenting with unconventional tactics. Ambassador Zhu Kung-min, humanity's chief representative to the Council, rose to make an announcement. The Council has approved the formation of the Galactic Defense Initiative. This new organization will coordinate response to threats like the Horde crisis. Admiral Lee has been asked to serve as its first commander. The chamber erupted in approving clicks, whistles, and applause from dozens of species. Admiral Lee looked around the room at beings from across the galaxy. 6 months ago, they had dismissed humanity as too weak to matter. Now they were adopting human methods and asking for human leadership. I'm honored by the appointment, he said. But I want to be clear about something. The Seventh Fleet didn't succeed because we were special. We succeeded because we cared more about helping people than about looking impressive. That attitude is why you're special. Deep thinker observed. After the ceremony, the senior officers of the Seventh Fleet gathered in a small restaurant near the spaceport. It was the same place they had eaten before departing for Viridian space 6 months ago. So, Captain Park, now Admiral Park, said, raising his glass, what's next for the famous Seventh Fleet? There's a crisis in the Andorian sector, Admiral Lee replied. Pirates attacking merchant convoys. The local governments can't agree on a response. Sounds complicated, Dr. Kim said. It is. That's why they asked for us. Pilot Han, now Wing Commander Han, grinned. Another impossible mission. Probably good engineer Nam said. I was getting bored with easy problems. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out the window at the busy spaceport. Ships from dozens of species came and went, carrying cargo, passengers, and hope to every corner of the galaxy. You know what I realized? Sergeant Major Yoon said. What? We're not the Seventh Fleet anymore. We're the First Galactic Defense Fleet. The name doesn't matter, Admiral Lee said. What matters is what we do with it, and what we do is help people, Captain Park added. No matter how impossible it seems, Dr. Kim finished. Admiral Lee looked around the table at his friends and colleagues. They had started as misfits and failures, commanding the fleet nobody wanted. Now they were the template for a new kind of military service, one based on cooperation instead of domination, creativity instead of conformity, and compassion instead of conquest. To the Seventh Fleet, he said, raising his glass. To the fleet that refuses to give up, the others replied. Outside, stars twinkled in the darkness of space. Somewhere among them, people needed help. Conflicts needed resolution. Problems needed creative solutions. And the galaxy now knew exactly who to call. The humans would come. They always did, even when it seemed impossible. Especially when it seemed impossible, because that's what friends do for each other.